Welcome to Attenuation, a weekly podcast where two friends come together to drink beer, discuss beer styles and trends, and just generally ruminate on the meaning of life, aka beer. If you enjoy your time with us, we invite you to become a weekly listener and subscribe to the podcast. Without further ado, here is this week's episode.
Hello, and welcome to episode 26 of Attenuation, a beer podcast. My name is Jason, and I'm joined by my best friend since 8th grade, Steven.
Hello.
Are you done making noise over there?
I was like trying to sit here quietly and then also not laugh.
That's hilarious. There
Didn't
was
make
about
it.
10 false starts that you didn't get to hear. So episode 26, that's half a year.
6 months.
It's crazy. We're not sick of each other, and we haven't run out of things to say.
We're getting there.
Speaking of which, we're going to be doing another deep dive today. I think we're covering yeast today. I don't know if we'll end up doing all the 4 main ingredients of beer, except one is water.
Yeah.
Right.
We're going to do like 3 episodes all on water. We're going to have to split that one up.
No, I don't think we should do that. I don't even want to do one episode on the water. But you know what? I bet it could be interesting.
Yeah. Hops and yeast. For sure.
Yeah.
Need their own episodes. But
water. We could do it in 5 minutes, maybe. We'll do it as a footer. Okay, so before, of course, we get into any of the main topic or beer news, we got to do the best part of the podcast, and that's drinking beer. So I'm going to introduce my beer and give some nose notes, and then I'll pass it to Steven. So today I have an other half beer. This is Mosaic Dream. It's a 6% IPA. And I got this a little while ago, and I was looking at my fridge what to pick, and I have all my IPAs like in a little row. And I always check that first because I know.
Yeah, the drink first side.
Yeah, I don't want them to be
fridge.
too old.
I've had quite a few IPAs get lost to the back of the beer fridge.
Well, yeah, and then they get.
And you're like, no, man.
You really don't want that to happen. It's funny because I used to like poo-poo that a little bit, but no, it's real.
It's real.
Yeah,
it's real.
You gotta drink those sooner the better. This is crazy color. The head on this beer is super thick. And I poured it a little too fast. So
Dang, dude.
It's really up there. But the color is nuts. It's a hazy, but it's really pale. A very pale, like yellowish color. I don't know. I always have trouble describing like the different straw colors, but I'm kind of at a loss for words at it. It's paler than I expected. It's not what I expected to pour out of the glass, so it's interesting. It smells amazing. It smells like limes, actually. Pineapple, papaya. Just like explosive tropical fruit coming off this. And a little spiciness. Okay, I gotta start drinking this. You introduce yours.
They made a Phantasm powder version of that beer.
Okay, I could see this. If Phantasm powder, again, we gotta try one side by side, but just the aroma coming off this beer, this is a good candidate if you wanted to like boost that with the...
Yeah, I would say if you wanted to accentuate those aromas.
For sure.
Sounds like it would be a good one to do that with. All right, so I am drinking Sour on Love from Duckfoot Brewing in San Diego. It is a tart cherry Berliner Weisse. Limited release. It says when it's gone, it's gone. I hate those.
Like they're never gonna make it again?
Guess not.
Okay, don't like it too much.
Oh, I probably will. Ooh, this color is really pretty too. So very, very pink, kind of a rosé color.
Yeah, that's gorgeous.
Very effervescent carbonation, but also a nice retaining head. So this is a wheat beer. So some of that wheat is creating a nice foamy head, but with also that nice Berliner Weisse German tart ale carbonation. The nose on this is awesome. It's a very classic Berliner Weisse, a nice lemon. Definitely get a little bit of that tart cherry in the nose. Almost like like a cherry limeade nose.
It sounds good.
I'm excited about this one. All right.
Okay, this is very good. And I haven't had an IPA for a long time, so this is a nice treat. It's really tropical. It's really well balanced, first of all. So you just have a cascade of tropical flavors, a lot of pineapple, mango, guava, and then it kind of transitions into those hoppier flavors, like kind of dank grass hop flavors, and then it's even a little bit spicy at the end. And that's good. I like it. It's just really well balanced throughout. So I'm very much enjoying this one. Thumbs up.
Yeah, big thumbs up.
I don't think I've had a beer from Other Half that I haven't liked.
Yeah, that's a pretty solid choice. Can't really go wrong with them. Awesome. Well, mine too is a 2 thumbs up beer.
2 thumbs up.
So good.
I think that's a podcast exclusive.
I could drink this every day. Easily.
But they're never gonna make it again.
Yeah, right. Those are the beers I love, of course. They're the ones I'll never be able to drink again. But no, so it's not very complex, I wouldn't say, but it's very classic Berliner Weisse. Nice, like crisp tartness, which is the only thing that really lends any sweetness to this beer is the fact that it's a little bit tart and the cherry flavor is not overwhelming. It's just this nice sort of undertone that gives a little bit of complexity and flavor to the base Berliner Weisse. And then it's just dry. It's so dry. It finishes like a champagne, sort of that same kind of bubbly carbonation.
Interesting.
It's just so good. This is like classic German sour wheat ale. Like it's just an awesome summer drink right here. So closing out summer as we start to cool down a little bit.
Yeah, the heat is finally starting to die.
Is it breaking there finally?
Yeah, it's like 90s all week instead of hundreds.
Nice. Yeah, we finally had at least some mornings are cool here. So
I'm ready.
Finally.
I'm ready to feel cold.
But I will miss some of these summer beers.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I like the beers of summer. I don't like the weather.
Fair enough. All right, so we have some beer news. The Great American Beer Festival has posted the results. Unfortunately, we didn't get to go this year.
Yeah. Well, they didn't do it.
I know.
They didn't have the festival, but they had the competition. They did their passport thing again.
Yeah.
But I'm not into that. I just want to go and just drink
that's the fun
beer all for 4 hours. Yeah, I mean, it's award season, I guess. Apparently, they had Great American Beer Festival results come out today, and just yesterday or the day before, the U.S. Open Beer Championship posted their results as well. So a lot of awards being passed out. It's kind of interesting. I didn't see a whole lot of overlap. There were certain breweries, I think, that probably submitted beers into the U.S. Open and not to the Great American Beer Festival, like Toppling Goliath, I think was probably one of those. They cleaned up in the stout section in the U.S. Open. Their Morning Delight. Have you had that, by the way?
Yes. I had it at the Great American. I had it at the
with that first year when they were actually there.
Yep. That's the only time I've ever had it.
Yeah. They released that not just a couple weeks ago, I think. And every time it's so funny because I see these very exclusive beer releases come out and they post them on Instagram. I always just go, oh man, I wish I lived there.
Is there if we win the lottery, Steven, you know what we're gonna do? I don't know if this exists. Is there like a high profile Instagram beer influencer that just like flies to every single release like that?
I don't know. I mean, maybe.
All right, if we get independently wealthy, we're going to do that for like a year. We'll just fly to every major release like that.
It would be cool.
It'd be so fun.
Yeah, it'd be so awesome. But yeah, they have Assassin as well.
I've never had that.
So they're Morning Delight, Assassin, and their whatever is like the KBBS, Kentucky Brunch.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Urban Brunch Stout or Breakfast Stout or something like that.
Something like that.
That
one always wins. I have one in my fridge right now. I almost picked it today.
Well, do you have the Founders one, probably?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's what you're talking about?
No,
okay.
I don't have the one from...
I was going to say the Toppling Goliath one is hard to find.
No, I don't have that one.
The really funny gold medal from the U.S. Open Beer Championship was the Creek category.
Okay, what one?
Lindemans.
Shut up. It's not even real Creek.
I was like, what, was there no other submissions?
They don't even use hand-collected sour mash cherries.
There's no other submission that actually used cherries. They picked the one with the cherry juice. What?
That's really funny. This is a callback. If you haven't listened to our episode, was that in our?
Oh, when Sour Wench from Ballast Point. Is that what you're talking about?
No, just about when we covered creeks.
Our
Lambic
right,
episode.
Yeah.
We kind of found out that they don't even really use. I mean, obviously they're at a massive scale production, but they basically use cherry syrup.
Yeah, these cherry
they're
syrup
they're just the mass
actually
produced
aging on cherries. Yeah, it's a very like commercial lambic. Yeah, no, I thought you were referencing when Sour Wench from Ballast Point won the sour competition at the gold and the beer festival. I was like,
travesty.
What?
Yeah.
That makes horrible.
I know. That makes me think some of the victories.
Like nobody's making a sour beer better than that.
Right.
Come on.
Yeah, I pulled up the Imperial Stout list for Great American Beer Festival, and Dark Seas from Mission Brewery won gold, which I know I can get that at Total Wine, but I don't think I have. So maybe I'll pick that up and see if it got gold. It must be pretty good. Although
nice.
Sour Wench did too, so who knows? No guarantees.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes, there's a few head scratchers, I feel like. But, of course, I'm always interested in who won, like what Goza was the winner.
Yes.
Because, well, first of all, it's my favorite style, but it's also such a niche style where I just wonder, like, who's doing it well. But there are so many people doing it now that that's also makes it interesting. But I noticed that Kolshan Brewing, their Goza, and it must just be a plain Goza. They just called Goza, so it's not fruited or anything. They've won multiple times. I don't know if they've ever won gold. I feel like they own the silver category.
Okay, they're second best always.
Yeah. But they're consistently on there, and they're the only ones. Like, I think Rubens won gold 2 years in a row or something.
Okay.
But that's it. Like, Kolshan's pretty steady, staying up in the top 3 there, so that's pretty cool.
Have you had that one?
No.
So are you able to get it?
I don't know. They're from Bellingham, Washington, so
it might be true.
Washington State. So I don't know how far it gets out of there.
Yeah, that might be
there's one from Kalamazoo.
Really? That's my old stomping ground.
The bronze from the contemporary Goza category is called Sour Flower from Kalamazoo Valley Community College.
Wow, that's amazing.
So I don't know whether they have a brew program at the community college. That's amazing.
That's really cool, and they're like winning.
That's really cool. And you, what is your category of choice? Well, Imperial Stout.
I looked up Imperial Stout, which I'm very interested in.
Oh yeah, you said Mission Brewery.
Yes, and then I also looked at Belgian style sour ales, and there's a Flanders style red ale from Caboose Brewing in Vienna. I would like to try that, but that's another one. Like, how would you even get that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The other one.
What about chili beer? Did you look up chili beer?
Oh, I did. Let me pull it up. So chili beer, the winner is Espojos with Fuego from Cerebral Brewing in Aurora, Colorado. Oh, maybe we could go there.
Okay, yeah, totally.
And the number 2 is from Colorado as well. It's Prescribed Burn from Steamworks Brewing in Durango, Colorado.
Okay. Aurora's in the Denver area. Durango is not.
Oh, okay. So that's kind of cool. I would like to try that as well. And number 3 is Apricot Habanero. That sounds amazing.
There you go.
It's actually habanero. It's very, very spicy, but it's also like I think all the spicy chilies, I think the actual flavor of it, if you can get past the heat, the flavor of habanero is amazing. I love it.
So I have a pumpkin beer in my fridge.
Okay.
From New Belgium, and it's called Atomic Pumpkin.
Okay.
It's something they brew every year, but they always try to change the recipe. This year, it's a habanero pumpkin beer, so that might be interesting.
That sounds
I just keep looking at it when I open my beer fridge, and I'm like, I'm not in the mood to try that yet.
Gotta be in a mood to try that.
There's a couple beers in my fridge that are like that. Like I have a Trillium Stout that I really need to drink, a coffee stout.
Oh yeah, just not in the mood.
But every time I'm like, okay, I have to figure out when I'm going to drink it. Maybe I'll drink it on the podcast next week.
You should. I love coffee stouts. I actually looked up the coffee stout category as well. And the winner, this is a great name for a coffee stout. It's called Vlad the Barista. And that's from Bearded Tang Brewing in Stanton, California. But such a cool name. It's like a reference to, I don't know, when you think of like stout, sometimes you think of like Russian Imperial Stout. But he's a barista, so it's the coffee version.
It's awesome. I also, since we were on the topic of pumpkin beers, I pulled those up, and it's Elysian Brewing from Seattle who got the gold with the Night Owl, and I realized that I have that in my fridge currently, so I have a gold medal.
You have a gold medal beer in your fridge.
In my fridge right now.
You got to drink that next week.
That's true. It's true. Elysian, I think they brew like 4 or 5 different pumpkin ales.
Oh, okay. So they're pretty good at that stuff. Well, especially got to drink it now because it's pumpkin beer season.
Yeah. Officially.
Because
Starbucks says so.
Seasons by Starbucks.
So other noteworthy ones, because I live in Texas and I'm always interested in what Texas breweries were able to win. Cowtown Brewing, which is in Fort Worth. I think I talked about them. I visited them like just sort of randomly. We were in the area and I found them, and they're that was when I was researching. We were researching for the Kolsch episode, and I was sort of just trying to drink every Kolsch I could get my hands on. Yeah. And so I drank their Kolsch. It was super good, and they served it in the little Stunga glass.
That's awesome.
But anyway, they won with Highbrow, which is a Oktoberfest beer, or they got silver. Meanwhile Brewing in Austin, Texas, which I have not visited yet, but I've heard good things. Their Pilsner won gold, and then Pint House Pizza, which is one of my all-time faves here in Austin. Their Hoppy Lager won silver.
Nice.
I'll have to look that one up, see if they're pouring that one.
So Electric Jellyfish didn't win?
No.
I love that Electric Jellyfish.
That juicy IPA category is...
That's probably like insane competition.
So many, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see who won the juicy IPA. Always an interesting category because there's so many submissions, but interesting to see Distill Brewing, which is in Illinois. They, by the way, I mentioned them last week because they make a great base goza. They won actually the gold for the juicy IPA, and then they won bronze in the juicy Imperial IPA with another one. So
nice.
It's impressive. Yeah. They're killing that category apparently.
Yeah, I'm scanning now that you organized by state. I'm scanning California.
Oh, we forgot to mention. This is what blew us away. Sudwork in Davis, California. We kind of talked a little bit about them last week. They won best brewery of their size.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty cool because I know we talked about them. I think a couple episodes ago about how they made more traditional beers, but they actually have I think they call it the Dock or something like that, and they make a lot of modern craft beers. So it seems like they're doing well. I have not tried one of those for a while, but maybe I'll have to swing by and see what they have available.
I do know that the awards that they won in the specific categories were for their lager and pilsner. So
I'm seeing their Backyard Hero American Lager got gold, so I can probably get that. Yeah, I should see if I can grab one. I'll drink it on I'll drink it on an episode.
They used to brew. I don't know if they still do. IPL, the India Pale Lager.
Oh.
So just a very hopped lager.
It's a little bit of the, what do they call that? Like the Yosemite effect, or the maybe it's the Statue of Liberty effect, where when you live too close to something, you take it completely for granted.
Oh, right, yeah.
I just never go there, even though it's pretty close to me.
Yeah, but people fly from around the world to come
to
to
go.
that thing.
Yeah. But because it's in your backyard, you're like, I'll get there tomorrow. And then 20 years goes by.
Yeah.
And you don't go. Yeah. Nice.
So a few more things to mention from the U.S. Open.
Okay.
Top brewery there was Toppling Goliath.
Nice.
So like I mentioned, they won a bunch of awards in the stout categories, and they're amazing. That's one that does not surprise me at all. And then they have a really funny category at the Open, which is best beer name.
I love that. What did they pick?
So the number one was I don't know what kind of beer it is, but the name is Finely Aged Plumber's Crack Ale.
Oh gosh.
There's another one called Triple, the Belgian style triple. It's Triple Dollar Bill, y'all.
It's pretty good, I guess.
There's a barley wine called Never Fight a Man with a Perm.
Okay. Agree.
There's a wit beer called That's What She Said.
Puns hurt my soul.
There's a rye ale that's Magic Carpet Ride, RYE apostrophe D.
Don't like that.
And then Dank Poets Society Imperial IPA. That one's not as good.
I like the Plumber's Crack one.
Yeah. So there you go. That's award season wrapped
nice.
up.
So hopefully next year we'll be at Great American Beer Festival.
Yes. Oh, I hope.
That would be nice. We should get into the main topic.
All right.
Of yeast.
So what is yeast?
We both did some research. So we're going to, report back on what we found. So I started with the word yeast. And it's the Old English word, I don't know if I'm saying it right, but gist. And it means to boil, which makes sense. Because, when yeast is active, it creates a froth. And it even warms up the whatever it's in. And because it's sending off waves of carbon dioxide. So makes sense. But yeah, I guess I want to start with this really cool thing I found. So very long ago, people didn't know what yeast was. They didn't know what was required for brewing specifically, but they understood that they had to kind of repeat the conditions of when they brewed last time. So a lot of times they would brew in the same bowl, and when the bowl dries out, the yeast can go dormant basically. And then if it gets into the right conditions again, then it can become active again. So we found, doing the research, we found something called, so this is a Scandinavian tradition. It's a piece of Norse brewing equipment. They're called yeast logs or yeast rings. And I feel like we have to do a picture of this on the Instagram, but they would basically carve out of wood. And some of them are crazy intricate. Some of them just look like a piece of wood with a hook on the top. But some of them look like they're like art, basically. And apparently what they would do is, as they were brewing, they would dip this actual log into the froth at the top. And then they would pull it out, and they would mix flour with it and let it dry, and then they dip it again. So they were building up these layers of yeast that was going dormant, and then they would use it to they use it the next time they brew. So they're passing it on. And apparently Michael Jackson, who's pretty famous for writing, what was the beer book he wrote? Do you remember what it's called?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, but he visited Norway apparently and was mesmerized by what they called the magic sticks. So these are functional yeast logs that people have kept them as family heirlooms. So they have these cool old pieces of brewing technology just in their houses, on their mantle or whatever. So that was awesome. And it just kind of goes, it goes to the point of one of the things we're going to talk about is that yeast is basically, it's been domesticated. So they think it's one of the oldest domesticated things that humans have domesticated. And I came across this really cool research that they were tracing back. They wanted to kind of figure out where brewer's yeast originally came from. And one of the things they found out about it is it's polyploid. So it has 3 or 4 copies of its genes in its genome, whereas humans are only diploid. So you have 2 sets of 23. But then they have 3 or 4. So they don't easily combine and exchange genetic material with wild yeast. So they've been really, really, really selected for a very specific reason. And they even traced back their genetic code, and they found that they come modern brewer's yeast has 2 ancestral roots. One is a European grape wine strain, and one is a rice wine strain. It's kind of crazy. It has it has an east and west background. But yeah, So it's kind of like cats or dogs. Like they just continued to, unknowingly at first, people were domesticating the yeast because they were using it again and again. And then they even say this is responsible for, like, before we talked about the difference between like ale and lager yeast. So ale yeast, likes higher temperature, and then lager is like the lower temperature. They think that's like also the result of domestication. So
yeah, I guess after like years and years of using the same yeast to brew, like the yeast basically is like, okay, I guess this is our job. Like,
yeah,
right? Like it just starts getting better and better at like doing what you wanted to do at that,
exactly.
at a certain temperature or something. Yeah.
Well, and a big part of like evolution, and not to get too much on a tangent, it's like people always think survival of the fittest, but like a lot of that is driven by the environment. So if the environment changes, if something is going to survive better in the new environment, it's going to flourish, whereas things that don't survive better in the new environment are going to die off, right? So you're creating this like repetitive environment. So things that don't live well in that environment are dying off, and the things that thrive in that environment are, replicating. So over time, you just get things that like that environment. So it's really crazy. I mean, it just...
Yeah, so a lot of breweries, even nowadays, they have their house strain. It's essentially their own domesticated strain that they've just used over and over and over again that essentially becomes their own. There's hundreds and hundreds of strains, basically, that the differences are very small, but there are differences in, what temperature they best ferment at, what alcohol level they create and thrive in. How quickly they fall out of the beer, that kind of thing. So
yeah, it's really crazy. And I know when we went to Russian River's new facility, they take yeast super seriously. They're like archiving it. They basically have a record, and they have stored some of the yeast from like almost every brew they've done, and then because then they can like kind of pull those back off the bench or whatever. Like, if they find one they really like. They said they could brew up from like, their small archive. They have these big tanks that they basically produce it in, let it populate up. I don't know what words I'm looking for, but they said they could do it in like 48 hours, like take a small amount and then let it reproduce enough that they could brew beer with it.
Right.
So it's become like super scientific, and they had like microbiologists that work there. Then like that's their job. It's like they're like the archivists of the yeast.
Yeah. So one of the other cool things they did there was the open top fermentation.
Yes.
So a lot of people, when you go to a brewery and you see the big like tanks where they're fermenting. Well, Russian River has these rooms that are like completely sealed, negative pressure rooms, so nothing is getting in there. They completely control the environment to be completely sterile other than the yeast that they are pitching. And then the top of the fermenter is open. And what this does is it creates an even healthier fermentation because the yeast, especially these ale yeast at the top fermenting yeast, they love oxygen. And so they just love being open to air. So they've created this environment where it's like perfect for the yeast. There's no chance of like some contaminant, because of the technology of the room and the cleanliness, and then they just get these super healthy fermentations. And what's great about that is they can just pull that yeast right off of there, and they can just use it over and over again, and you have these like incredibly healthy yeast that create amazing fermentations and stable, consistent flavors every time.
That's really cool, because I remember like when we were home brewing, one of the things you got to do is agitate the wort, because you want to get like as much oxygen in there as possible, because once the yeast burns through all that oxygen, but they're basically giving it a super ample supply by having that open top. That's really cool.
Yep. It's funny because oxygen is your friend like at the beginning and then not later.
I know, right? Because oxygen is like the thing.
Because then you can get oxidation of the byproducts, but at the beginning, like you want the yeast to have plenty of oxygen to eat. Yes, beer making is, I don't know. Don't let anyone ever tell you it's easy. It's not as easy as they make it sound. I feel like
No.
I feel like
And
there's so many things that can go wrong.
yeah, and you're dealing with like living organisms. Yeah, it's crazy. And not to mention they're doing it at like scale, which is like 1,000 times harder than just
Yeah.
make like a small batch. Yeah.
But they do have like complete control over temperature. That's the other thing that homebrewers don't always have is like a temperature controlled fermentation. So if you're trying to brew a beer with a yeast that ferments best at like say 68 degrees. I mean, whose house is 68 degrees unless you really, really like it cold? So really like unless it's winter time and you can, you have a spot maybe in your house that would stay that temperature consistently, you really kind of have to figure out, okay, look, my house is at 78. Maybe I should brew a beer that with a yeast that best ferments at 78 degrees, since that's what, that's the only temperature I have.
It's a good point, unless you want an insane electric bill.
Yeah.
and a very unhappy family.
Yeah, and I mean you can always ferment these yeasts at a different temperature. Maybe it's not the most optimal temperature for that yeast, but it will ferment at maybe a little bit higher temperature, but you're always going to get some other like a different taste profile. So different byproducts, your esters are a little bit higher because of it. So it's going to affect the flavor of the beer. Maybe not in a necessarily a bad way, but those are all the factors that go into your yeast fermentation.
Well, yeah, and if you want that consistency from batch to batch, you don't leave that up to chance, right?
Right. So those are the struggles of home brewing, remedied by more and more equipment. There's always something else you can buy if you want to up your game.
For sure.
Well, so I was going to mention, I don't know if this is the right time, but I'll mention two of the main characteristics of the yeast that you're using. So every strain has a flocculation rate and an attenuation rate. Attenuation.
Did you say the titular line?
Attenuation. I'll just keep saying it. Yes. So the attenuation is the degree to which the yeast ferment the fermentable sugars. You kind of have low, medium, and high strains. Low attenuating strains usually ferment 72% of the sugars or less. Medium strains are 73 to 77%. And then high is anything higher over 78%. So that's like any style that should be drier, less sweet, you're going to want to use a high attenuating yeast because you want as many of those sugars fermented and turned into alcohol. And then the other big thing is flocculation, and that is how apt the yeasts are at clumping. And then once they've clumped into a big enough group, they fall out of the beer and fall to the bottom. So any beer that you want clear, you want a high flocculating yeast because those yeast cells will clump together, fall to the bottom of the beer, and then you can filter those out of your beer much easier. Whereas a low flocculating yeast is going to be a much hazier beer. A lot of your like wheat ale yeasts are going to be low flocculating yeast. You're gonna have a hazier beer. Your some of your like West Coast IPA yeasts, those are going to be high flocculating yeasts that are going to fall out, and you're going to get a much clearer beer.
Okay, fascinating. I actually didn't know that. So why didn't we call the podcast flocculation?
That does sound cooler, actually. Should we change the name?
No. I like it. I like attenuation.
I liked the attenuation because it also had to do with like dampening a signal, right? Like taking a loud signal and bringing it into focus. So
nice.
Kind of similar to taking your fermentable sugars and fermenting them, taking them down. But yes, like I thought it was a cool crossover.
It is a cool crossover between
beer and recording signals.
Yeah, and flocculation doesn't have any recording aspects.
Although I feel like that's what we do every week is flocculate. I don't know.
Just a clump.
As a not as an actual definition, but it just seemed like it's time to flocculate again. Sounds like a term you would use to be like just shoot the breeze.
Just sit on the porch and
Sit and talk about nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. A little bit of the podcast is talking about nothing. We try to stay on topic, but
yeah, that doesn't always work.
No.
Sometimes we drink enough beer that we can go off topic.
It depends on what beers we're drinking, right? Yeah. If I'm drinking imperial stouts, barrel-aged imperial stouts, we'll definitely go off topic.
Well, where do you want to go from here with the yeast? Well, let's talk about the man.
Okay.
The father. Yeah, the man, the legend. The father of microbiology and the father of yeast.
You forgot his name already, huh?
No, I forgot the word. Identification, yeast identity. The father of identifying yeast. Louis Pasteur, the French chemist, who was a very smart man, who was not impressed by the doctrine of spontaneous generation, which was the idea of the times, which was, you just
dip this wood thing in it.
Yeah, it's magic.
The magic sticks, yeah.
And these they just spontaneously generate. But what he documented and his experiments proved was that so basically he used sterilized sealed flasks and then put medium in there, and then nothing ever developed. And then he opened those to air, and of course now microorganisms would grow. It's kind of funny that that even took an experiment to show.
Well, because it is kind of magic if you think about it. If you just leave something out, then stuff starts growing on it. And if you can't see them because it's microscopic, you would just think they came out of nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. But yeah, I mean, he won all sorts of awards for that simple experiment.
For putting a cap on a petri dish. Yeah.
But
what year is this? This is
1850. 1850s, 1860s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
But what's really cool, I mean, he did a lot with germ theory of disease, and the word pasteurization comes from his Louis Pasteur. He invented the pasteurization technique of treating milk and wine to stop bacterial contamination. So he's just really cool. But anyway, he did a lot of research on yeast. And he was one of the first to figure out the respiratory technique of yeast, where they use oxygen to then create CO2 and alcohol as byproducts. There was a guy who owned a distillery. His last name was Bigot. He had a distillery where he made alcohol from beetroot sugar. And he kept getting this sour milk flavor in his drink instead of alcohol. And so he took it to Louis Pasteur and was like, what's going on here? And Pasteur analyzed the chemical contents under a microscope, and he realized that the ones in the sour fermentation, the cells were completely different. And then in the alcoholic fermentation, he saw yeast, and he was like, oh, so one is bacteria creating lactic acid, and the other one is yeast creating alcohol.
So this is basically is this the first instance of yeast being isolated?
I don't know if that case is, but he certainly was certainly isolating yeast in his experiments and figuring out what byproducts came from yeast, what the yeast byproducts were of fermentation.
And then how long did they, is this before or after? I guess it had to be after this. Then they had to edit the beer purity laws.
They had to add yeast.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, there's a fourth.
There's a fourth thing. So, what's funny? Did you ever play that game? There's a game called Timelines.
No.
It's really cool. It's a very simple concept. It's there's different it's either historical events, but the one I'm thinking of is inventions. So it's just this huge stack of inventions, and you have to try to put them, everyone plays together, and you put the cards down. You have to try to put them in order of when they were invented.
Gotcha, okay.
And it's always mind-blowing. So when you were talking about, this is 1850, when he's doing this research, the light bulb wasn't invented until 1879. So to put it in context, that's so crazy. So maybe that's why they didn't have a it wasn't obvious to them that if you seal the
Yeah.
because
Well, what's crazy too, though, is like, I mean, we talked about some of these beer styles like Goza and how this beer style is 1,000 years old, and they didn't even understand like exactly.
Yeah, I wonder if they were doing like in those like this would be. I feel like we have to do more homework on this topic. And I
Like,
don't
they
even
didn't
know.
understand exactly how they were making
Yeah,
making
like
beer
what was
over and over
the
again.
fermentation process? Like, what did they do? What was their equivalent of the magic sticks of like the like what
Yeah.
did they use, or was it just that the equipment would have like residual yeast in it and stuff like that?
I mean, they knew that like I don't know what year they figured this out, but they did definitely know that they would have to use some of the essentially use some of the beer that they
Okay,
made in the next batch
gotcha.
to continue, to recreate. But and some of that, like the old styles, were really you just put it in the barrels, and the barrels, were holding the yeast in the wood.
It makes alchemy make way more sense.
Like
I don't
why
know,
they believe
like
that was possible.
yeah,
Or,
like if you worked in a brewery like 1,000 years
it was
ago,
like it
you're
was literally
basically a
magic
wizard.
every
Yeah. And people were like, dude, that guy's making magic drink. Like, and even the wizards, they didn't even understand what they were doing. They just knew, like, they understood the procedural steps that they had to do to get the resulting product, but they didn't understand, like, the underlying mechanics.
Yesterday's kind of magic is today's
science.
That is pretty great, actually. Like, I'm a wizard. That's why the brewers were so popular. Yes.
Well, you really want to go on a tangent?
Yeah.
I used to play. Did you remember when I used to play 40K?
No.
It's like a miniatures.
I don't even know what that is.
Oh, it's a miniatures game. So you have to paint all these little miniatures, and you roll dice, and they fight each other.
Nerd.
But the year is 40,000. Okay, but hear me out.
Okay. Sorry.
And it's a period of decline, which we've never like fully experienced globally. But imagine like civilization hits a peak, and then it starts to deteriorate for whatever reason. So like there's no new inventions, and like no one knows how to run like a nuclear reactor anymore. So it's that situation. And so like all the people that run technology, they kind of like cross back over into being scientists, like back into being wizards, because they just know how to keep things going. But like if something breaks or someone had to have them like define the underlying process, they couldn't do it anymore. So in a civilizational decline, today's science becomes tomorrow's magic. So we'll have to hope that doesn't happen in our lifetime.
Probably not.
I hope not. But we'll remember.
But it would be like me traveling back in time and being like, there's this cool thing, electricity. How does it work?
And they'd be like, can you make it? And you're like, I don't know. I just turned on a light switch at my house.
I'm useless.
You should learn how to do one thing.
Like me time traveling is completely useless.
Because you wouldn't be able to like recreate anything, huh?
I couldn't like kill Hitler. I can get close enough.
Yeah, that's the thing. People are always like, "Oh, you go back in time and kill Hitler." Like, how?
People were trying.
Do you speak German? Like,
unless you could like time travel to a specific spot and like you would just appear next to him and then be like,
"Oh yeah, I guess they would say you kill him as a baby."
Had you know where Hitler was as a baby at all times.
This would be a good movie. It's like a dark comedy.
Yeah.
Someone gets a time machine and they decide they're going to go back in time and kill Hitler as a baby, but they don't really know how to find him. And they don't speak.
They're just walking down the street asking,
and they don't speak German. And so they're trying to find they're trying to describe in a language they don't speak a person that's a baby. Like, how would you know who he is?
Oh my goodness! I guess you try to do some research before you get in the time machine and head back, right?
That's not a good plot mechanic for our dark comedy.
Like figure out what school he went to or something.
Yeah. But the person in our movie is not going to do any of that preparation. That would just ruin it.
Yeah.
That's my screenplay. I'm going to start working on it.
Oh my goodness. Well.
Is that enough of a tangent for you? Sorry,
yeah. I don't know how to recover.
Oh, I know. We're going to talk about like the different types of yeast. So brewers yeast is used like primarily, but then like lactobacillus and Brettanomyces are different kinds of yeast. So they're, those are used in like sour situations and stuff like that. So it is interesting that like, but even I feel even among like brewers yeast, there's still so many kinds you can use.
Oh yeah, yeah,
So many
hundreds,
different results.
hundreds.
Because I know that's one of the cool things when it closed down, but there used to be a brewery that had like a home brewing side, and they would sell all the equipment and stuff, and they had a fridge with all the cool yeast in it, and all the different strains have like all these really cool names, like whatever, whatever they name yeast, but they had cool names like Dragon Fire and all that stuff.
Yeah. Nowadays, Weisse is the one of the biggest yeast companies.
Okay.
White Labs is the other.
White Labs.
One
Yes,
you'll see a lot.
That's the one they had there. Mm-hmm.
I mean, basically you can like tailor order your yeast, right? Except whatever beer you want to brew, whatever flocculation rate, whatever attenuation rate, whatever temperature you want to brew it at, like there's probably a yeast strain that fits your goal.
It's crazy how dialed in it is. And that's important too. I guess that's another thing we kind of wanted to cover is like, and I don't think I really appreciated this until we started the podcast, is that the yeast can really, really affect the flavor of the beer. And in some styles of beer, the yeast is kind of the thing they're highlighting.
Right.
So
yeah, German Hefeweizen, your banana and clove flavors are just the esters and phenols from yeast fermentation byproducts.
Yeah, and I did not appreciate that at all. I always thought, and I think a lot of people getting into it, especially if you get into it, like you worship the hop, right?
Yeah, the hop for sure.
To the yeast, yeah.
No one ever lists, well, very rarely does a brewery list like what yeast they use.
Oh yeah, almost never. Like
yeah,
like a lot of times they say the hops on the side of the can. I'm actually looking at my can to see if they do on this one. No, they don't. But yeah, I very rarely will you see the yeast used. We need more. There needs to be more love for the yeast.
Need more yeast love.
That's what I've decided.
Yeah, I mean, so just as a little overview, with the esters, you can get banana flavors, apple flavors, cherry flavors, blackberry, dark fruit flavors. Do you think of, like a wine profile? A lot of wine tasting profiles are heavily influenced by the esters. And then the phenols are kind of the clove, spicy, burnt wood. You can get some interesting flavors from yeast phenols. And then you can also get a lot of sort of off flavors from the yeast, and either poor fermentation or over fermentation, or fermenting at the wrong temperature, oxidation of some of the yeast byproducts. We talked about diacetyl giving a butter flavor, which in low levels can be part of the overall flavor profile that's desired.
But you don't want too
right.
much.
Yeah, and then you can have too much. So, but the yeast are playing such a huge role in not only how the beer tastes, but like how the alcohol is perceived, how does the beer balance overall with the hops and the malts as well, so there's just like, it's such a huge part. And then you can also make it a not a huge part, right? You can use a clean yeast. Of course, your lager yeasts are going to be much cleaner. You can have almost zero esters in your beer from that low temperature lager fermentation. So you can
and we talked about
make it a non-factor essentially.
Yeah, and we talked about that with like East Coast IPA. A lot of times they make the malts like a non-factor. So it is interesting, the balance of like malts, yeast, and hops, and kind of like which ones you dial up and which ones you turn down is dependent on the style that you're brewing.
Yeah, and it makes you realize like it's so easy to think that beer, like how many beers can you really make? Like how different can beer taste from one beer to another? But there are so many variables and so many yeast strains and so many different kinds of hops and hop combinations, and when you add the hops to the beer and what temperature you ferment at, it's endless essentially.
Yeah, it's basically infinite, which is really cool because that means they can continue to make new and interesting beers. Yep. And I mean, yeast is the lifeblood of beer, really. Like without the yeast, you don't have it's the alchemist of the beer, right?
Yeah, I saw a great quote. It was like, brewers make wort, yeast makes beer.
That's true. The yeast makes the beer. You just set up the initial conditions and then you let the yeast do the work. That's funny. I was watching a YouTube video about yeast kind of in preparation for the episode, and the guy said, if you work in a brewery, you don't really make beer, you're just a yeast farmer. Because you're trying to make the yeast as happy as possible so it can do its job.
You don't have happy yeast, you don't have beer.
True.
No matter what you do. You're just making sour beetroot.
Yeah, what was he doing? Yeah.
I don't even know what he was trying to do. Make some sort of vodka or something out of beetroot.
Who knows? People try to ferment everything under the sun.
Any sugar.
Yeah. Every civilization, throughout all of history has found something they can ferment. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, really, I'm sure it was an accident at first, right? You left some grain out, it got wet, started to ferment. You
were hungry, you ate it tastes funny, and you felt good.
Yeah. I think we should do that more.
That was weird. I would like that to happen to me again. What do you think, Stephen? Did we cover yeast?
I think so.
If you have any feedback you'd like to give us about yeast or something we missed, you can always email us at attenuation.contact@gmail.com. And if you'd like to follow us, we're on the gram. I think I'm going to post a picture of these magic sticks.
Oh, also, I just wanted to say, because I've looked this up, so ale yeast, like the main ale yeast is Saccharomyces cerevisiae.
Okay.
And I just wanted to say that because I practiced saying it for a while so that I wouldn't screw it up, and I didn't want to not say it.
Nice.
And waste all that time.
All that time you practiced.
That I practiced, yeah.
Your pronunciation. Well, it sounded excellent.
Thanks.
We could have recorded that and made it the Google.
Yeah, the Saccharomyces cerevisiae.
Yeah, you could. There you go. That could be when you Google how to pronounce that word. Just could be your voice. But we're also on.
Okay, continue.
We're also on Instagram. What's our Instagram again? Attenuation.podcast, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Where we have over 40 followers. Actually, we have a lot more than 40 now.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing pretty good. Graham's pretty hard, but Steven's photography is on point. So
I won't tell you how many followers we have.
Nice. All right.
It's a good number. It's a great
number. I think we've gone far enough off the rails.
Yeah.
So this was episode 26 of Attenuation, a beer podcast. My name is Jason, and I'm joined by my best friend since 8th grade, Steven.
Appreciate the yeast.
Appreciate the yeast. Underappreciated part of beer. And we are bidding you adieu and cheers till next time when you'll join us for episode 27.
Woo! All right. Cheers, buddy.
Later.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Attenuation, a beer podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Instagram or Facebook for more fun content. Catch you next week. Cheers!